All right. It seems like the lobby is slowing down. I'll admit people as they come in. First, I want to say welcome to everyone that's joined us today. This is a webinar for alternative sanitizers and disinfectants for the food and beverage industry. I'm Kathy Black. I'm the Pollution Prevention Manager at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. Today's webinar is being hosted by the National Pollution Prevention Roundtable, the Food and Beverage Work Group. This webinar is being recorded, and we will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentations. So feel free to type your questions by clicking the bubble at the top that says chat. It is up to the left, and then you can type your question in there. Oh, we have a few more people joining, but you can use the chat to type your questions as we go through the presentations. And then at the end, you can also raise your hand and I will unmute you. So now I'd like to introduce our speakers. We have two today. As the Turi Cleaning Laboratory Specialist at the Toxics Use Reduction Institute at the University of Massachusetts in Lowell, Alicia McCarthy works with Massachusetts manufacturers, companies, organizations, and formulators to test safer cleaning and disinfection solutions and devices in the lab. She also presents and has experience and training technical assistance organizations about on-site assistance with toxics reduction use and identification. She manages the UMass Lowell undergraduate and graduate student employees in the lab, mentoring them and about how to apply toxics use reduction within their own and field of environment while gaining valuable laboratory experience and skills. Sorry, I'm admitting people into the lobby, so I'm getting a little distracted. Um, she's she shares this experience and skills with these students. She also won the most valuable student pollution prevention award in 2016. Alicia earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Health and a Master's of Science in Occupational and Environmental Hygiene from the University of Massachusetts in Lowell. She also obtained a second master's degree in Molecular Cellular Biotechnology at the University of New Hampshire. Our second speaker today is Dan Lawson, and he has spent over a decade in the medical device industry, rather, earning unparalleled insight into the intricacies of our healthcare environment and some of the biggest needs yet to be addressed. Daniel partnered with Viking Pure's co executive team to introduce a disruptive, patent protected, and environmentally conscious technology to transform cleaning and infection control in commercial facilities across a wide range of industries, including food and beverage production. He is dedicated to creating a movement to remove toxic chemicals from the environment and to challenge the status quo of what it means to truly clean and disinfect safely, sustainably, and effectively. So we'll go ahead and let Alicia begin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kathy. This is great to have the opportunity to talk today. Today, I'm going to be talking about safer alternatives for food and beverage. So to give you a little bit of background about the Toxics Use Reduction Institute, also known as TURI, we are an organization that is part of the Toxic Use Reduction Act, which includes the Office of Technical Assistance, also known as OTA, and also the Department of Environmental Protection, also known as DEP. But to focus today on TURI, where we specialize is analyzing policy implications for chemicals in Massachusetts that also impact on a national level, but also on a global level as well. We train professionals in how to reduce toxics within their facilities, organizations, and institutions. And we provide that technical and financial support as well through grants that we actually give out. If you're a Massachusetts company, for example, if you're assisting anyone in those areas, we do have a business grant as well as a research grant annually that you can apply to. We also conduct and enable research to develop and assess performance of different types of alternatives. We have a wet laboratory that focuses a lot on green chemistry as well as industrial assistance to find safer alternatives. We do janitorial testing, performance testing of third-party testing of Green Seal, Eco Logo, and Safer Choice certifications for different types of companies. So we're very well versed in that area. And we also now have a antimicrobial lab where we do a lot of sanitization and disinfection testing that we've been focusing on and trying to grow different types of services as well to help both upstream and also downstream for providing different alternatives that people can adopt. And of course, we love to collaborate. So we work with different community groups and also all of you as well. So if you have an idea or ways that we can partner, we're always interested in talking with you and learning more about how we can provide better services for you. I bring up toxic use reduction planning because that's really a critical part of TURI, where we actually help train people in to do what we do and also be able to help companies who have to report on what they're using every 2 years, be able to submit a document, and that's part of that act in Massachusetts. But it's still applicable on a greater scale. So even if you're not going to be a TUR planner that will have to submit something to the state, you could still take this course, and it's invaluable, the information that you'll learn. It's a full alternatives assessment. So if you want more information on that, and especially hands-on, we have a next course that's kicking off on August 15th, 2023. I put a QR code down here and also the URL if you're interested to learn more information on that. So really to focus in today, and some of you may already be familiar with this specific guide, we have an assessment of alternatives for cleaners and sanitizers for brewing industry guide that was released in 2020. Why do I bring this up? Especially if we're going to be focusing on a broad scale of food and other types of beverages, not just the brewing industry. Because the purpose of the guide, at least for this application, was to really focus in on brewing process, but you can use this as a great template to kind of kick off to find out, how do I find alternatives? How do I test for them? And what type of information do I need to gather to really get an idea of whether this is a good option for whoever I'm trying to assist or adopt within a facility? And I want to showcase a case study, which I'll talk about in a moment, of how we took this document and applied it to a food manufacturing place. So the case study today that I will be talking about is Cedars. And actually you can see in the back of the video we have here dark chocolate hummus that Cedars had us utilize. This is actually one of the hardest soils that they were trying to remove, especially after being baked on to their vats. Um, and we use what's known as coupons. So they're a particular type of substrate that we try and do as a baseline understanding of, can we remove what you need to remove as part of your cleaning and sanitizing process? So in this video, you can actually see one of our new safer chemicals specialist that we just hired on. Amelia is actually applying that chocolate hummus on there to prep to be able to bake and try and get the same consistency that you would see at the facility as well before we do performance testing. A little background on Cedar's Mediterranean Foods. They're located in Haverhill, Mass, and they have a little under 101 employees. So it's pretty big for their size, and their manufactured products are a wide range. So they do hummus, cold salads, cream cheese snacks, and yogurt-based dips. So you can see there's a lot of different things that they're trying to clean off and remove as they have different products that they need to get out the door. But as I mentioned, they really wanted to focus in on that dark chocolate hummus because that was the hardest thing that they were having trouble with remove. And when you're assisting someone to find safer alternatives, sometimes to streamline the process, you want to find what is their hardship that they have for really finding something that will work. And you want to test that first, because once you know that that works in practice, you can then backtrack and be able to verify that the other types of soils will be removed with those same types of alternatives that you identified. We started working with Cedars back in the summer of 2022 as part of a P2 grant, where Amelia actually got to work on site and be able to look at their food waste streams, water usage, energy as part of that grant. But one thing they really expanded to, which is our specialty area, was looking at the chemicals that they were using in their process to and seeing what types of cleaners and sanitizers they were using in their clean in place or CIP process. And you can see here on the side, they had a mixture of different types of products they were using, both for sanitizers, cleaners. So you have a range of sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide, sodium hypochlorite, peroxyacetic acid that actually has a mixture of sulfuric acid in this application. So it's a little bit different than your normal peracetic acid, also known as peroxyacetic acid, and then quaternary ammonium compounds as well, or QACs, which quaternary ammonium compounds are definitely one of those types of disinfectants or sanitizers that is also sometimes placed in some cleaners too. So it's really good to look at that. We're trying to replace those because we're seeing a lot of health impacts that we're concerned about, and our science advisory board is currently digging deep into that to see what type of information is out there, and really provide you guys with a better understanding of why you need to switch to make that case. They also, as just part of things that we always ask them, is their needs. What are they looking for in alternatives? So they definitely specified that they needed to have an organic cleaner and sanitizer because they were a fully organic product line that they wanted to upkeep no matter what step and phase in their process, and just make it as a whole for their entire uh, facility as well. And they were hoping to have a no rinse step that was preferred. So what we ended up doing was we looked at the guide and we said, all right, well, we tested all these alternatives and we did full assessments on them. Let's really kind of look at seeing, do any of these options actually work in practice on the dark chocolate hummus or any of their other soils that they were looking at to remove it. So we took on the list of the different products that we had tested from the brewery project and actually replicated it in-house as well. You can see here, I kind of highlighted above in the picture of the coupons that that's kind of what it looked like after it had been heat treated in the oven to look what it would look like in their vats that you could see on the right side as well, and their general equipment. And we were trying to replace it by looking at those different types of stainless steel alloys, looking at ultrasonic agitation, which they had on hand, and just generally what it would do by itself in an immersive state. We use gravimetric visual and ATP values. It's really dependent on the facility. It's really important to ask them too of what they need to be able to make the case to the decision makers in the group. And even their customers if they have to have that type of buy-in. So it's really important to get that kind of information when you're deciding what type of analysis you need to look at. And Amelia actually tested all these, the same products that we actually had in the brewery assessment guide, just to see how would they perform. And for the most part, a lot of them ended up working. The issue, what we ended up finding was whether or not the adoption was actually feasible for certain applications. But they were really interested in the LFE enzymatic cleaner because out of all of them, they already had a good relationship and understanding of what their needs were for size wise to be able to order. And LFE, we already had a vendor in mind and they were hoping to potentially work with them to just adopt it in practice. As for the sanitizers, one of the main ones, which I'll go into further about that in the next slides to come, they were really interested in the hypochlorous acid application of it. So we ended up actually partnering with Viking Pure to see if that was feasible in their applications, because they were hoping to have something that could be generated on site. And that also had case studies that they could then look at and possibly have something that they could adopt easily without having to worry about too much of manual dilutions in process. A quick update of where we are with this right now. Cedar's actually applied for one of our business grants this year, and that is still ongoing. So if you know any business in Massachusetts that would like to apply, feel free to have them apply as well. But they wanted to move forward, like I said, with the enzymatic cleaner. But what we found was that the cost was too expensive compared to their 5229 AFCO. product, which was a sodium hydroxide solution. Uh, but when we did performance testing with the against the LFE enzymatic cleaner, as well as another alternative that we found that's actually marketed as a floor cleaner, surprisingly, we talked with the vendor for that company, which is Kinzua Environmental. They said basically what they do is they can generate on site based off of need of the client as well, which is really good for different companies that need to have a large or small amount. They can work with them to be able to generate what they need. Some of their products actually have fragrances to them, but they're able to actually have a no fragrance option, and it is still organic and an enzymatic cleaner. So that's kind of what they're moving forward on. And to make the case, we actually ended up finding that you could use it at a lower temperature, as you can see in the table here. They actually tried to move down from 160 to 130 as a cost reduction when it came to their process with the 5229 AFCO. So we ended up testing the LFE enzymatic cleaner at a lower temperature than we did with the brewery project. So you can kind of manipulate those different types of variables. And still, the LFE outperformed, and that's why we were originally going to move with that. But with the cost, we were able to justify it because it was just a tiny bit more expensive than the 5229 AFCO, the Enzo NRF cleaner that we had Lisa, our contact at Cedars, and Amelia kind of calculate, all right, well, temperature wise, if we're reducing, what are the cost savings there? What type of like where we can have ready to use versus actually having to dilute the solution there. So they're probably moving forward with the Enzo NRF cleaner, and they are looking at a large amount of cost savings for the energy usage side of things. And that's what ended up driving and making the case for the decision makers at Cedars. As for sanitizer alternatives, like I said, we worked with Viking Pure, and sadly, it couldn't meet their 130 gallons per minute that they were hoping to get at that time. And so another option that we had come up with was generating it in a large tank so that then they could just apply to their system. But when we looked at the facility footprint, it just wasn't able to adopt. So it didn't mean that it wasn't a good solution, and it doesn't mean that it couldn't work for other different types of applications at different facilities. You really need to look through to see what are the needs of the company, the environmental aspects of it when you're implementing, to really get an idea of what you can implement and what might be infeasible based off of their needs. So we are looking for other options, and we're referring back to the testing that we had done previously, like I said, looking at the sanitizers that were identified in the brewery assessment, and we're hoping to get more information and connect with different vendors for cost comparisons. So I'm hoping the next time that if we have this webinar, I'll have a lot more metrics for you to kind of make a really good comparison and a case study for Cedars on how you can apply it in different ways within food and beverage. Now I kind of want to go into aqueous ozone, because this was something that we also looked at, as well as hypochlorous acid, which we'll learn about later with Viking Pure. With aqueous ozone, it is different than just generating ozone gas. That's a very important distinction that you want to make, because ozone that is in gas form is a lot more hazardous compared to having ozone that is generated in water. But it can be utilized for surface cleaning and sanitizing. And we have done testing, which you can find on our Cleaner Solutions database, or cleanersolutions.org, where we keep all of our laboratory testing. And we've worked with different types of companies. You can see here, Clean Core, we've actually worked with them. And that was part of the brewery project. We actually worked with them for that testing specifically. So that would be better for like large scale industry implementation. Whereas Enzo, you can actually see below on the image on the right, is a at home, or even you could use just for general cleaning or sanitization, where it generates it inside and actually sprays it. So this could be a really good option if you're looking for something to replace just a general cleaning and sanitizing on surface areas. because it does a great job of removing oils, fats, greases, and other soils. And there's other vendors out there that make similar products. So I definitely encourage you to kind of check around to see what is out there and get feedback from the companies that they're interested in implementing this, because it can break down those molds and mildews and bacterial biofilms. But when you're reading those devices too, I think it's really important to look to see if it specifies specific type of water that it needs to use. For example, we ended up finding with an Ozo, you actually have to use um, filtered water. And at home, granted, this might not be an issue for a facility to be able to adapt to that. But if you're looking for general use of it, if you don't always have access to that, that will make an impact on how much ozone is actually made within the solution. And how it works is it produces an ozone, aqueous ozone is produced using an ozone generator. So it takes electricity and oxygen enriched feed to feed gas, which then splits oxygen molecules into two oxygen atoms. And the ozone that's produced after oxygen atoms unite with the oxygen molecules will stay in that solution for a certain amount of time. With that in mind, you have to think about how you are using it. So if it's being generated on site versus, you know, pouring into a mop and bucket, you're going to lose, and that ozone will break down eventually, and you'll just be cleaning with water. So really look into it, and we've done some testing in there, because with certain types of generation on site, it's really important to know the lifespan of these products as well. And some other considerations you want to think about is facility modifications. So thinking about if you're going to have to create an installation to have it within your current pipeline and make those modifications, and just knowing the cost of it too. So some of these are on a rental basis versus purchasing. So talking to these different vendors, but it can range between 8,000 to 48,000 depending. Including with what type of, gallons per minute you're hoping to generate as well. That's really important to have those conversations with the vendors. Next, I want to talk about a new type. It's not really new. It's new for Turi to kind of be doing an evaluation on here, but it's plasma activated water, also known as PAW. And this is something that we want to do more research in this area, because it wasn't listed in the brewery assessment guide that we have, because we've been exploring this more mostly for industrial applications for surface treatment. Uh, but we've been expanding into looking at, okay, well, can it disinfect surfaces with a plasma gun versus having plasma activated water and actually producing reactive oxygen and nitrogen species, specifically hydrogen peroxide, into water, so that you're able to have the antimicrobial effect with a lower pH level. Um, with these, the claims right now are that they're stable for 3 weeks. So we're hoping to really take a deep dive into that and kind of see how well it works, on what types of organisms, clean versus dirty coupons as well, or just parts in general. And we're hoping to really collaborate with some vendors to get some equipment in-house if we don't purchase it specifically with us. So this is still a relatively new area, but I did want to bring this up because I think it's another interesting alternative that might be really easy for some of your facilities to adopt, because it's relatively cheap for the most part. Just to give you an idea, the plasma chamber, which is basically a chamber that uses a gas, usually it could be air, nitrogen, whatever you need for certain applications for industrial purposes, that alone is only between $2,000 to $3,000. So we're hoping that this might also be a potential option depending on our cost analysis and the other alternatives for other facilities to adopt for their food and beverage cleaning and sanitization applications. And with that, thank you very much. Any questions?
We're actually going to save the
Okay,
questions to the
sorry.
end. And now we'll switch on over to Dan Lawson.
Awesome job, Alicia.
Thank you very much.
Definitely learned a lot.
Give me 1 second here to just pull this up. Okay, awesome. Well, it is a pleasure and an honor to make all of your acquaintances today. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us. Kathy, Alicia, thank you for letting me share this platform with you as well. Very excited to be able to talk to you a little bit about this, very awesome technology. I'm obviously a little bit biased, but just as kind of an official introduction, beyond what Kathy was able to provide to give you a little context, Dan Lawson, Viking Pure Solutions. We manufacture electrolyzed water generators that I'm going to tell you all about today that produce two very powerful either cleaning, degreasing, or sanitizing solutions. And we're going to focus a little bit on the science behind it. I'm not sure if you all knew you were signing up for, for a 10th or 11th grade chemistry class today based on some of the talking points in these presentations, but I certainly hope you find it interesting. My mission, really professionally, is to relentlessly provide awareness, and education to the dangers associated with using toxic chemicals, really regardless of the industry. We are just very passionate about sharing what we know, and quite frankly, what's becoming much more common knowledge, in the world that we live in, kind of regardless of what we do from a professional standpoint. Engaging in regular contact with toxic chemicals is something that we envision in the future will no longer be possible. Hopefully, through the implementation of novel technologies like electrolyzed water, ozone, plasma, kind of, et cetera. But as it pertains to really cleaning and disinfecting in the craft beverage production, as many of you know, the most commonly used sanitizers, cleaners, are your hydrogen peroxides, chlorine dioxides, peracetic acids, sodium hydroxides, and oftentimes, when you come into these facilities, you see that there is this manual dilution process that needs to occur, and these elevated levels of chemical handling, that can lead to significant risks. Not just from a short-term perspective, like with burns or headaches or kind of breathing issues associated with being around the chemicals, but with long-term effects as well. It's man, I don't want to say it's unfortunate because we're trying to bring awareness to it, but it's certainly unfortunate that that we're learning these days that the chemicals that we expose ourselves to on a regular basis can cause very significant long-term effects. And I often like to share pearls of kind of what that looks like. The solutions that are causing these asthmatic reactions or headaches, et cetera, today, down the road have been proven, to increase, lung degeneration rates, or neurologic defects, that can actually equivalent to, roughly smoking a pack of cigarettes every day. So, me and my team members spend a lot of time, and really what gets us out of bed is sharing this, because we want to make people aware and, have them look a little bit closer, at the products that they're using within their facilities, and not forget to evaluate technologies that have been proven for a long time. And one of those is a technology that's called electrolyzed water. Many of you may be familiar with this technology. Perhaps you've seen it in a handful of different applications out there, as the product has been very well studied and established now for upwards of 70 years. The concept is relatively simple. We mix water, salt, and electricity together. We leverage a technology that's called a membrane separation technology that takes sodium chloride or salt and separates it into its two main ions, sodium and chlorine. What you essentially get are these byproducts of each other, that have independent but maximally effective roles in cleaning and sanitation efforts. The first chemical that's created is an extremely low concentration sodium hydroxide, not necessarily comparable to some of the chemicals that Alicia was speaking to a few minutes ago that require manual dilution, et cetera. And you're buying lye, like kind of in its concentrated form, and diluting it with water. This is a much safer and kind of more effective way of creating low concentration sodium hydroxide, as well as a chlorinated based hypochlorous acid, solution. As you know, sodium hydroxide is a phenomenal degreasing, emulsifying solution. Can be used on a multitude of different surfaces that you would see within a brewery or a food packaging and processing establishment. And then hypochlorous acid, is a natural solution that our bodies actually create. Our white blood cells emit HOCl as a natural defense mechanism when we have an invading germ inside of our body. These machines that create electrolyzed water kind of replicate that natural process of mixing water, salt, and electricity together, and are able to produce in unlimited amounts, both of these solutions right on site, inside of a facility, so that they no longer have to order, store, or from our perspective, most importantly, use, these dangerous chemicals to create good product. So after kind of implementing this concept of on-site generation, you remove a lot of the pitfalls associated with handling chemicals. The products are, when they come out of an electrolyzed water generator, are in their ready to use concentration. So there's no need to manipulate the products. You can't over concentrate them. You can't create a dangerous or a hazardous chemical by mixing it, or making it higher or lower concentrated. There is because of the efficacy and safety behind them, these solutions, all meet food surface safe, regulations, through the EPA, and can be applied to surfaces without requiring a rinse and excess water usage. And I'm excited to show, obviously some of the, I think case examples that we have, from serving in this space for some time. The sodium hydroxide product, I mean, at its concentration, which is, about 300 parts per million sodium hydroxide, the solution when it comes out of the electrolyzed water generator is almost 99% water, extremely small concentration of NaOH, but you still get a very effective cleaning and degreasing solution. So when put into a CIP or to a mobile, pump and cycled through the bright tank, for example, this would be the solution that would, break down the hops, the beer and the kind of the residues, both organic and non-organic, that may potentially be inside of the tank. That would be what you would cycle first, through the system for roughly 30 minutes. After, you have, broken down those soils and you've confirmed via your ATP testing that, that the surfaces meet, the right, efficacy requirements, you would then cycle through the hypochlorous acid, just slightly, below, neutral from a pH perspective, which would cycle through and make sure that you get adequate sanitation, inside of your tanks. From a mechanism of action perspective, I always like to draw attention to how HOCl works and how it's a bit different than your more kind of standard, sanitizers like peracetic acid or some sort of hydrogen peroxide solution. At its core, at a molecular level, hypochlorous acid possesses what's a neutral charge, as opposed to being naturally negative. Much like the pathogens that you're trying to kind of interact with them, this neutral charge that's found within hypochlorous acid makes it almost like a sniper, if you will, for the germs that it comes in contact with. Its neutrality allows it to bypass, the cell wall of a pathogen without being recognized by the actual pathogen. There's no chemical reaction that needs to occur for that cell membrane or wall to break down. And when hypochlorous acid is able to penetrate, the cell wall, once it gets inside, it releases the hypochlorous acid, and it deactivates the cell instantaneously, really from the inside out. This has been, proven multiple times, not just through, the types of pathogens that you would interact with, inside of your facilities, like E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria. We're going to talk about pectinatus and Lactobacillus as well. But hypochlorous acid, at relatively low concentrations that still you know, categorize the solution as non-toxic, are maximally effective at killing, the hardest germs to kill that we know about, from an efficacy perspective. And you'll often see that HOCl will possess, much higher regulatory delegations than just a food surface safe sanitizer, and actually also possess hospital grade level disinfection, thus meaning that it's eradicated some of the hardest to kill bacteria and viruses, really known to man. But that's not the topic of our conversation today, and I want to make sure that I keep this obviously relevant. It's the gram-positive, lactobacillus pediococcus, that we see, really, from our work within the space, and I'm sure that you would agree, are the most, prevalent, pathogens that are, causing beer spoilage. These solutions, both the sodium hydroxide as well as the hypochlorous acid, can be used really very liberally, in these processes to integrate, sanitation or disinfection levels of cleanliness at multiple kind of stages throughout the packaging and processing, not just using their CIP, but we've had customers use them in their canning, where they're spraying the canning down, cans down before they receive, the beer, to ensure, that the surfaces that the beer is coming in contact with don't possess, potentially some of these pathogens to spoil the product. There is extensive too, peer-reviewed, published data, looking at utilizing electrolyzed water technologies, kind of in these spaces. Some studies have shown that, low concentration hypochlorous acid, was sufficient and as effective, if not more effective, than more conventional sanitizers such as peracetic acid. They've evaluated this both via culture as well as, through more standard kind of day-to-day ATP, testing. It's, the way that the solutions are created kind of on site in unlimited amounts, allows, consumers to, kind of, work and utilize the solutions, kind of across their entire process. Here is a, kind of pictorial representation of what an electrolyzed water generator looks like there on the right. That blue box, if you will, is kind of where all of the magic happens. That's where water, salt, and electricity kind of come together. And then you get these two outputs. The outputs, like I said, are a hypochlorous acid-based sanitizer and then a sodium hydroxide-based cleaner. They are dispensed into their relative tanks. And then team members are able to, pull the solutions from those tanks directly. No need for dilution again, and then kind of, transport them throughout, all of their different, needs, throughout the facility. This was specific to a local brewery here in southeastern Pennsylvania, who was pumping these solutions through their little portable CIP, systems, and kind of dispensing them into the tanks. But some of the things that we saw, which were, I think, tremendous benefits to the implementation of these types of solutions versus what really some of the industry standards are now, are, a lack of steps that are required to achieve the same, if not a better outcome than what you would be, kind of expecting. And I think that you would see, with the utilization of these solutions, a few things. One, a dramatic decrease in the total amount of water, that is necessary to clean and sanitize, and the time, kind of required, because there's no rinse step that's required. You can move right from your caustic straight into your sanitizing step, without the need, to rinse. And the amount of, cost savings with that extrapolated over some time is quite significant. The other thing that we've seen, and I think this is relatively interesting, is a lot less of a need for hot water. You can certainly, heat the sodium hydroxide solution if that's desired. Some think that it works better when it's hot, in addition to having some of its caustic properties. But many customers actually don't heat the solutions. The solutions are created at, slightly cold or room temperature, and are very effective kind of in that state as they're being, pumped and used, throughout the systems. This was another kind of unique, I think study, and again, a couple of pictures here to give you a practical example as to how these solutions would be distributed through a facility. But based on a 250,000 barrel output per year, which is I think relatively large, you can expect to see a significant amount of water savings, associated labor because of that, and because you're saving time, right? Like theoretically, we'd like to think that you're creating more beer, selling more beer, and there's the potential there to even increase revenue opportunities. So it's a really novel technology. It's an established technology in a handful of different applications that I think would, quite frankly, blow all your minds in healthcare and kind of, direct to patient contact from like a hospital wound debridement perspective, and overall, environmental cleanliness, disinfection. Many hospitals are starting to leverage this type of technology as their primary form of chemical, creation and overall infection prevention. And it all started really kind of in the food packaging and processing industry. These solutions are very well established on poultry farms and chicken packaging organizations. And I think because of the effectiveness and the growing market, in the beer space, and the need to become more sustainable, to use less water if possible, and to overall save money, you're going to see hopefully a lot more interest in leveraging electrolyzed water and on-site generation. So thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Dan. That was terrific. If people have questions, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm also going to allow you to be able to unmute, or maybe not. If you raise your hand, I can unmute you if you have a question. Right now, we had a question in the chat, which Alicia answered, but I'll go ahead and say it for the group so that everybody can hear the answer. And the question was, is there a breakdown on cost effectiveness versus size of facility? And you're muted, Alicia. There you go.
Yep, sorry. Yeah, so I think those are really good metrics that we hope to capture, especially as we're really engaging with more people within the food and beverage industry. And that's something of interest, especially where we, as part of our process for working with companies, we do evaluations and follow-ups. So we're slowly starting to capture those metrics as well for after 6 months of implementation, a year, 3 years, 5 years, because sometimes those cost savings or even the feasibility of people implementing those little growing pains of implementation don't show up until much later on. And it's really important to follow up. So I appreciate you highlighting that, because I think it's really important to have those things. We just don't have them right now, but in the future, we're hoping to get a lot more to share with you.
I have a question for Dan. Have you installed any of these systems at a smaller size brewery? I mean, 250,000 barrels a year is pretty big.
That's a big one. Yeah, we have. We've worked with small, mid-size, and some larger, facilities. But yeah, absolutely. And from kind of the manufacturing side, we've got a way of kind of customizing, right? Like the needs, the overall needs for the facility. We've got different size generators and things like that. So it's not a one size fits all. And we work very closely with just operators of all size, to make sure that they can utilize the technology, but but not have more than they need, if that makes sense.
Okay. We have a question for you in the chat, and we do have somebody with a raised hand, which I'll get to in a minute. But the question in the chat for you, Dan, is hypochlorous system going to be cost effective for a rather small facility such as a mushroom grower?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'm kind of just like stunned that question came up, because this is a relatively new industry for us. I work and live in southeastern Pennsylvania, about 15 minutes from the mushroom capital of the world in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. And we have been working very closely with a handful of very well-established growers, as well as packaging organizations in that space. and yeah, have seen amazing benefits in the environmental, opportunity for cleaning and disinfecting. And we actually also now have a few growers that are utilizing the product directly on their mushrooms, like in the growing process, to eliminate like surface-based pathogens, et cetera. So if you'd like to talk more about that, or if you'd like to see some case studies that we have specifically in that space, please, if you don't mind, share an email address or a way to get in touch, and I'd be happy to send some of those things over.
Alicia shared in the chat a link to a case study, looks like. Do you
Yep,
want to
it's
say something?
Awesome.
for fat moon mushroom. And actually, we did look at hypochlorous acid, but I think definitely talking with Pure, who, or any other vendor that does hypochlorous acid as well, just to see on a larger scale, because the one that we tested was just more for small scale consumer use, or like you could use it at schools or anything like that. So definitely, I think having those conversations with those vendors is really important. But you'll see, I also listed a couple other options because we did work with Fat Moon back in 2020, and we're really close with them and watching them grow because they have grown over time, and they have a lot more customers that they're trying to reach.
That's terrific. I'm going to take another question from the chat and then I will go to our raised hand. The next question is a slide with the title Electrolyzed Water Solution. Solutions effective, all natural, and safe. Is this a similar process to salt cell generator on a saltwater pool, turning the salt into chlorine?
Great question. Whoever asked that, very astute observation. Yes. A bit of a kind of a funny anecdote. When I first started doing this about 10 years ago, and when I learned this, I thought saltwater pools like legitimately had ocean water in them before that. I didn't own a pool growing up or anything, so I was a little bit unknown. But yeah, so you're using salt to create free available chlorine. Uh, but not all systems are created equally, and something that you want to look at, specifically if evaluating this kind of platform of technology, is how much salt do you get in your final solution. There are manufacturers out there who have salt-free claims for their e-water. I think that's really important to take into consideration, especially when it comes to the impact that those solutions will have on the surfaces that you're applying them to. There's a lot of different types of stainless steel, et cetera, in your establishments, and having a highly concentrated saltwater solution can be a lot more harm than good, regardless of the non-toxicity component, if it's going to be rusting everything out. So you would want to look very closely, kind of at the claims, and just ensure that you're using a product that is going to be created using sodium chloride, but is not going to have any residual sodium chloride in it.
And I do want to say, so we actually did an assessment that we're in process of trying to get published soon with that information in there. We were looking at different devices on the market because during the pandemic, all these different devices came out of the woods. And what we were finding, which won't be in the article, but good to kind of share there, was that we saw on some websites, especially when we were doing performance testing for some of these companies, that they were just referring to hypochlorous acid. They actually weren't looking at what they were really generating. So we looked at total chlorine, both from the water aspect of it, what was being generated or what was in the solution before generating, and then afterwards. And there's usually a pH scale composition, the pH curve that gets referenced all the time when it comes to hypochlorous acid generation, which is usually, you want to be in that like more neutral range. And that's how you know if you're making hypochlorous acid. If you're getting into the high 8, 9, 10, going up that way, you are most likely generating sodium hypochlorite and not hypochlorous acid. So it's really important to take a look at those things, and usability as well. So what's nice about having some of these generators too that we've noticed, instead of you putting that salt and water in, or salt vinegar water, depending on what the instructions are, which you'll get totally different outcomes from for the most part, you you have less user error in those situations, and a lot more consistency. what we were finding was when you played around with user error, you were more likely to really mess with that pH scale and range of what you potentially were generating.
Fantastic.
Great point.
Rob, I went ahead and you should be able to unmute yourself to ask your question. Fingers crossed.
Yep, got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so kind of building on Kathy's initial question, you in the notes in your slide there, it mentioned the 250,000 barrels of production brewery in Massachusetts, where I'm working with a number of breweries. It's more like 2,500 barrels, and there's probably 100 breweries that are producing somewhere in the vicinity of that number. So I'd love to just again hear if this is feasible technology for breweries of that size, if you have any idea whatsoever on like what an ROI might be, and is there what kind of a learning curve, if any, do you think there might be for a brewery changing its process? Because just on its surface, from the safety and chemical perspective, I think a lot of breweries would definitely have high interest in something like this.
I appreciate you asking that. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, just to reiterate, you know, every single, brewery that we would encounter would be, would be independent, kind of the previous one. And because of the modularity of this technology, you can really, put a system in that is going to create these solutions and create them at a rate as well as in an abundance that would be necessary so that it's not overkill. Typically, I can't speak for other, manufacturers of electrolyzed water generators kind of in the space, but the way that we do it is a bit different. We offer our technology at a monthly rental rate, so there isn't like a huge upfront capital investment, to purchase these machines. What we often do in a trial, which is also offered at no charge and no risk to our consumer, is we place it there for a period of time. We get an idea of what their volume is, and we really correlate that with what their existing chemical spend was. And our goal is to put together a rental opportunity, for that person, that company, to rent the machine, at a monthly rate that would actually be less than what they were spending on chemicals. And inside of that rental fee, we cover the life, of our generator and all of the disposables and, really everything that's needed to operate it. We have a complimentary, preventative maintenance program. All of our training, onboarding, and certification work is done, kind of within that. And yeah, we're passionate about what we do, and we certainly don't want cost to be the the inhibitor of someone trying to make the move in a non-toxic direction. So yeah, we definitely have alternatives for them. I didn't want this to be a sales pitch for Viking Pure today. If you were interested in kind of learning more, about this technology and some of the different product offerings that we have, yeah, maybe we can connect, offline, and yeah, we can take every every opportunity as an individual one and make sure that they feel supported and satisfied through this introduction process.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? I don't see anything new in the chat. Feel free to raise your hand and I think I've unmuted everyone. You have the ability to unmute and talk. If not, I can give everybody back 5 minutes of their day. Oh, 4 minutes. The time just switched. Thank you so much to our speakers. I learned a lot and I value your time.
Thanks, Kathy.
So
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely be reaching out to you guys both for other reasons. And
Awesome.
to all our
Look forward.
participants, thank you for joining this meeting. We will have another webinar coming up in another couple of months. Rob,
Y'all
did
take
you have
care. Thank you so
another
much.
question?
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks, Alicia.
Okay.
See ya.
Bye. See you, Dan.
Thank you. Bye-bye.